Assalamualaikum, hi student. So I would like to deliver chapter number 2 about MIC260 about fungal reproduction. And before we proceed with this chapter, please look at your syllabus about chapter number 2 reproduction. There are few sub-chapters here, which are number 1, introduction to reproduction of fungi. Number 2, importance of the type reproduction to fungi classification, asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, and lastly, brief description of parasexual reproduction. So we will move on into the current topic, which is about fungal reproduction. So after finish this lesson, chapter number 2, you should be able to understand about the reproduction in fungi, and you should be able to know the importance of type reproduction to fungi classification. You should be able to understand the asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction through fungi, and also you should be able to describe of parasexual reproduction. So that's all about OBE or outcome-based education after finish this chapter. Okay, as you can see here, this is four major groups of fungi, namely, as stated here. Of course, for example, here chytrids, zygote fungi, sac fungi, and club fungi. So we want to focus more on this type of group fungi in this chapter. Okay, how fungi reproduce? Okay. Actually, fungi are very different with other animal and plant because they have a compartment of hyphae that contain one or two more nuclei, and of course, as you have learned before, monokaryotic, which means each compartment has a single nucleus. Dikaryotic means two distinct nuclei within each hyphae compartment. And fungi are capable of both sexual and asexual reproduction because they have two hyphae of opposite mating type fuse. And of course, in some fungi, two haploid cells immediately result in diploid cell or 2N. For example, basidiomycete and ascomycete, they have dikaryotic stage of 1N plus 1N before parental nuclei fuse to form diploid nucleus. Okay, again, as I told you before, this is actually a reproduction of fungi. There are two types. Number 1, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. And of course, if you look at for asexual reproduction, involve only one parent of offspring genetically identical to parents, involve regular body cell, and it's a very quick process. Meanwhile, for sexual reproduction, they're involving two parents, offspring genetic mix of both parents, involve specialized sex cell, and the process is slow. So this is actually a comparison between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction in fungi. Okay, we go one by one. For reproduction, this one for filamentous fungi, they are using asexual reproduction by fragmentation of hyphae, and also they perform asexual and asexual reproduction by spores. And for yeast, they use asexual by budding or fission. For example, Schizosaccharomyces Pompeii, fish for fission, and for budding, for example, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Okay, for sexual reproduction, of course, by spores because they are in high stress condition. Okay, it's very important term that you should know about that. Number 1 is actually about fragmentation. What is fragmentation? Fragmentation is actually the process of mycelium. They are actually torn apart by external forces, and these bits can start new individual if conditions are favorable. Number 2 is fission. Fission is simple splitting of cell into two new daughter cells by constriction and the formation of a cell wall, for example, yeast. And the last one, budding, okay, is the production of small outgrowth or bud from a parent cell, and has a bud is formed. The nucleus of the parent cell divides, and one daughter migrates into the buds. Okay, the bud increases of size while still attached to parent cell, and eventually breaks off and forms a new individual. Yeast, for example, reproduce via budding, but some other fungi in different conditions. Okay, also their telemoth produce. This is another example. Telemoth produce both sexual and asexual spores, and the moth lost ability to reproduce sexually. This is actually also an important term for reproduction. Again, telemoth and anemoth. Telemoth for produce both sexual and asexual spores. Meanwhile, anemoth, they have a lost ability to reproduce sexually. Okay. Again, about asexual reproduction for binary fission. If you look at that, this is normally binary fission for asexual reproduction happen in bacteria, amoeba, some algae of one parent cell split into two identical daughter cells. Meanwhile, for budding happens in yeast, hydra, corals. Parent produce a bud, and bud gets detached and develops into offspring which is identical to parents. So this is about binary fission and budding. Okay, you can take a look the picture that as you can see from here. Again, next asexual reproduction is spore formation. This reproduction happens in fungi, green algae, molds, and non-flowering plants, for example ferns, and spores also produce at each spores develops into offspring which are identical to parent. Another asexual reproduction is vegetative reproduction, but this is not in fungi, does not involve seed. Some offspring can grow from cutting, for example collars, runners, for example strawberries, tubers, for example potatoes, or bulb, for example tulips, which are part of the parent plant. Okay, next one is actually spore formation. For the spore, many not all fungi are capable to produce for both sexual and asexual, usually producing spores as a result. Purpose of sporulation, of course, number one, dispersal. Number two, preservation, potential for growth at the same site, and genetic variation. Sexual sporulation provides the potential for genetic variation. Okay, factors influence the type of sporulation. Of course, number one, genotype of the species. Each species possesses its own genetic program. Number two, genotype of mycelium. One strain may behave differently to another. Number three, extent of somatic growth. A certain amount of growth is often necessary before sporulation can occur. And the last one, specific environmental condition, for example temperature, light, specific nutrient. Production of spores is most common type of reproduction, and where each spore germinates to form a germ tube that grows into the mycelium. So spores also can be various colors depending on type of fungi. For example, here the color of hyaline: green, yellow, orange, red, black, brown, black. Shape: oval, oblong, needle-shaped, helical. Numbers of cell, one to many. Arrangement of cell, and they are where they are situated. Okay, we continue this one later on.